Okay, this one's going to be on trigger pull. We're going to talk about trigger pull. We talked about some of the fundamentals of shooting: stance, grip, trigger pull, sight alignment, sight picture, breathing, all those things. Now we're going to talk about trigger pull. So what is trigger pull? Trigger pull, and people will use different terminology. They don't like to use pull, because when you think of pull, you're thinking of yank or jerk. And a trigger pull has to be smooth. Watch this hammer come to the rear and strike forward. I'm going to clear this again just to be sure. Okay, now watch this trigger pull. That's pretty quick. That's kind of a yank of a trigger. Watch this barrel when I pull this trigger. Does it move? I did that on purpose. See when I yank it fast how it dips? That's pulling the trigger off. That's considered a bad trigger pull. If you want to know you've got a good trigger pull, when this trigger snaps, this barrel should move. We used to set a dime up here in the military on the guns we were shooting for the pistol team to make sure our shooters were holding it straight. We'd have them hold their gun out. We set a dime up there on this edge, and you have to pull the trigger. And that dime shouldn't fall. And you keep pulling, and you keep pulling nice and slow, and it doesn't move. And if the dime didn't fall, then we knew you had a pretty good trigger pull. Okay, so trigger pull is about smooth, steady pressure to the rear on this gun. Now, obviously, because you see how long, watch this hammer start moving when I squeeze this trigger, and how long it takes to get there. It's moving, it's moving, it's moving, it's moving. I'm holding it safe. I'm staring at the sights. I'm looking at the sight line. I'm squeezing. It's moving, it's moving, it's moving. Bang, it falls. When a hammer falls, it should be a surprise. So I'm not pulling until it falls. I'm just pulling consistently. Now I'm going to pull the same way, but I'm going to pull quicker because I have a smooth trigger pull. Because years and years of pulling a trigger, I don't have to go this slow. When you're starting out, people go here, they go half and they stop. Oh, forward, backward. But undecisive. Come on, pull the trigger. I use that term on my horse channel a lot. You got to be able to pull the trigger. Don't hesitate. Don't think about it. Don't go half and stop and half. And the longer it takes for this trigger to get to the rear, the longer you have to keep sight alignment, sight picture, and keep your target in there. And you're thinking about breath control and all those other things. So the faster this happens, the less time you have to worry about all that other stuff. But you don't want it happening so fast that you're just yanking this trigger and jerking it. So this is a jerky trigger. That's not a good trigger pull. A good trigger pull is smooth, consistent to the rear, and the gun goes click. The barrel shouldn't move, comes back at a decent pace. I'm slowly applying pressure to the rear. I can do it quicker. I can do it quicker. I can do it quicker. I can do it faster. I can even do it faster. But the faster I do it, the more this little barrel is moving the lightest little bit. And whenever this barrel moves a fraction of an inch, the farther it gets down range, the harder it is to hit the target. Now, if I cock the trigger in single action, remember what I was doing here? This is double action. One trigger pull, cocks the hammer, and pulls the trigger. Single action is when the hammer's already back, and now all I gotta do is touch the trigger, and the hammer falls. Now, obviously, there's a lot less movement here. When I press this trigger in, it doesn't take much. So, I'm still not yanking this trigger, because I can still yank this trigger and make it go down. I want this trigger to be smooth, steady pressure, even on single action. So I'm going to squeeze, 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 and it went off. Okay, I'm going to do it with this hand. I'm squeezing, went off. Pressure, 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 went off. So I'm not ever yanking the trigger with the intent of making this hammer fall. I'm just pulling consistently to the rear. Trigger pull is critical, and I think it's one of the most critical things out there. Because trigger pull has a second component, and it's called trigger reset. And trigger reset is the trigger has to reset after it's pulled. So when I pull this trigger back, this trigger has to reset. When I let this trigger go, watch, you'll hear a click. Hear that click? That was a reset. I don't know if you heard that. That's what's called trigger reset. If you want a good trigger pull, you need to squeeze the trigger, hold it back, and consciously think, release slowly, just like I pulled slowly, trigger reset. Pull slowly, click, release slowly, waiting for that trigger reset. Trigger reset is critical on guns. So when you have this an automatic, this is a single action gun. Will this gun shoot right now? Hopefully you guys are saying no. It can't shoot because the hammer's not back. I can pull the trigger all day, ain't nothing gonna happen. It's a single action gun. Single action guns have to have the trigger cocked, and then one pull of the trigger releases the hammer. Double action, the hammer could be up, and then I could pull it and it would cock it and squeeze it, like on the other one. They make double action automatics, it's semi-automatic, first one was a revolver. So, on this gun, a trigger reset is very small. There's not, watch how much this trigger moves when I press this trigger. Not much. Very move, I mean, fraction of an inch. Now I've done some trigger work on here and made it soft. But trigger reset on here, I'm going to hold this trigger back. I'm going to cock it like it just fired around, and I want you to listen when I let this trigger go to hear this reset. I don't know if you heard that. Let me do that closer. I'm going to squeeze it, chamber around, listen for the reset. And I can't see what time it is. Oh crap, it don't show me the time when I'm this way. Did I forget to hit start? Oh, okay, I'm at 6 minutes. Stupid camera. Very, I'm going to reset this trigger again. Hopefully you can hear this. Watch how little this thing moves. That's how little it moves. So again, this is a single action type of pistol. And 1911 is the model. It's a Colt. This is a compact Springfield Armory. This is a Taurus. So, trigger control and trigger squeeze. Dry firing a gun is the most important thing you can do when you get your gun. Remember, we talked about that 5,000 times. Rick, that's crazy. Who's going to sit around 5,000? You better be doing it if you want to be good and proficient. I'm not saying this for my health. I'm telling you, you want to develop muscle memory. When I pull, even though I'm the only one here, I still have to check the gun every time I squeeze the trigger, make sure I don't blow one off. You sit around and you practice this trigger squeeze. What this does is it trains your finger on how to pull. It trains you to keep it smooth. It trains you to feel that reset, squeeze, reset, squeeze, reset, squeeze. And all I'll do is I'll sit around, I don't do it now, but I used to when I was trying to get better as a shooter, and I would sit around my house with an empty gun and I would aim at the chair, at the phone, at anything, and I would practice. I would practice my sight alignment, my sight picture. I would practice holding a good squeeze, and then I would squeeze and I would shoot. I would aim, I would squeeze and I would shoot. I would aim and I would squeeze and I would shoot. Aim, squeeze, and shoot. So I wanted to see, when you're shooting a gun, you're going to know, you're going to realize we're focusing on this front sight. So it's very easy to tell when you squeeze that this barrel moves. Because if you're concentrating on that front sight, it should move. It should be right in the same spot when that trigger goes bang. Trigger squeeze, extremely important. If you get a gun, you need to sit around and squeeze that trigger and practice trigger squeeze. Develop muscle memory, develop strength, develop your grip, develop your finger to pull the trigger, develop your two-handed grip, develop and reinforce that sight alignment, sight picture, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Front barrel doesn't move, squeeze the trigger. Soft, nice and easy, smooth, 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 smooth. Constantly practice your trigger squeeze. Don't think that you can do it. Oh, I watched Rick's video. Oh yeah, I did it a couple times. Oh yeah, that's pretty easy. And because that's not what my focus is here. My focus is to get you to where you don't have to think about it. When shit hits the fan, when you're in a crisis situation, when things go bad really quick that you can't predict and you end up with a gun, you need not to be thinking about, gee, I got to remember what Rick said about trigger squeeze. Gee, I got to remember not to yank the trigger. Gee, I got to remember about sight picture. Gee, I got to remember about my grip. Gee, I got to remember about my stance. Gee, I got to remember about making sure I'm leaning forward. You don't want to be having to do all that, because all that creates lag time and slows down your reaction time to defend yourself. You want things muscle memory, you want it built in, you don't want to think about it, it needs to be done snap, crackle, and pop. And again, 5,000 times muscle memory. Alright? Went over trigger pull there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, but I'll figure it out after I turn this off when I can think and stop thinking about trigger pull. Hope that helps. Buddy Mr. T, you're good boys.